Welcome to Dallas, Texas, where we thought there was bad blood, but maybe it's just blood in the water. We're at Humperdinck's, the unofficial headquarters of Oklahoma football on OU Texas weekend. Barry Tramel, along with OU writers Jake Trotter and David Ubben. All OU Texas coverage is presented by the Central Oklahoma Nissan dealers. And guys, we're on the eve of the big game. This looked like one of the all-time bad blood games, but a couple of OU losses have changed the blood. The Longhorns smell victory. Do you guys sense a huge confidence boost for Texas going into this game?
Well, they can't get too confident because this is not the Oklahoma team that lost to BYU or at Miami, because Sam Bradford is back at quarterback, and that's a big difference between having a redshirt freshman and a guy who's won the Heisman Trophy. I think I look for Sam Bradford to have another big game. He's had two big games at the Red River Shootout already, and I look for that again tomorrow.
David, you're new to the staff. You come to us by the way of Fayetteville, Arkansas, and the University of Missouri. Both of those teams have played one or two big games in their history. Nothing quite like the Red River Rivalry, though. Your impressions coming in as an outsider looking over the last few years, including the big scandal, the big controversy of a year ago. Now we're on the eve of the game that should settle all the debate.
Yeah, we are. I think they're kind of downplaying what happened last year. I don't know what the reasoning necessarily is for that, but I think that a lot of that is just not wanting to drop down the class level, and that's admirable. But at the same time, it's hard to believe that the loss last year won't be fresh in their minds when they do take the field against Texas. And the same's true against Texas. I think they feel like they wanted a chance at the national championship and the Big 12 title, and it's hard to believe that won't be on their minds when they take the field as well.
Well, this is a huge game. All OU Texas games have huge stakes. This one may be bigger than most for this reason. If the Sooners win, they're in the driver's seat for the Big 12 South. If they lose, they're 3-3, and there are 70 teams in America, Division 1A, with a record just as good. How big is this game from an Oklahoma perspective?
Monumental, because if you lose, as you said, you're 3-3, and it's not like you have a cakewalk the rest of the way. At Kansas, at Nebraska, at Texas Tech, Oklahoma State at home, 4 losable games. Conceivably, you finish 8-4, 7-5 at that point, which even at the injuries is a real disappointing season. But if you win, all of a sudden you have the driver's seat to the Big 12 South title, to the Big 12 championship, and frankly, based on what happened early on this season, I think that's a pretty good season, all things considered.
Well, this is a game in which if the Sooners win, they're not assured of a Big 12 title. You mentioned, Jake, the games at Tech, the games at Kansas, the games at Nebraska. If Texas wins, the race might be over. Texas goes to Stillwater, very tough game. But outside of that, the Longhorns should skate through their schedule. This is one of the few chances for somebody to knock off Texas in this conference.
And I think that you brought up an interesting point that I wouldn't rule out a three-way tie again this year. If OU knocks off Texas tomorrow and then OU drops one of those road trips and then possibly Texas loses that game at Stillwater, you're right back where you were last year. Granted, national championship might not be on the line, but at the same time, you could have a real interesting situation yet again.
Well, this is a very big game for Bob Stoops. He's lost 3 out of 4 to Mack Brown, and there was a time when no one in Oklahoma thought Bob Stoops would ever again lose to Mack Brown. What turned the tide in this series? Why do you think, Jake, that Bob went from owning Texas to where now he's pretty much on the run against the Longhorns?
Well, I got 4 words for you. Vince Young, Colt McCoy. He's had great quarterbacks, and early on he had good quarterbacks in Major Applewhite and Chris Sims, but these two guys have taken it to another level, and Vince Young really elevated the program as a team that could win the big game. They won a huge game at Ohio State, OU, and then the national championship, and Colt McCoy has really carried that.
Well, part of that success for Texas is this. Mack Brown is 19-4 in games decided by 3 points or less. Bob Stoops, 5-8, including 2 one-point losses this season. Will the success rate of one team, Texas, as opposed to the lack of success by Oklahoma, could that play a factor if this becomes a fourth quarter game?
Well, mentally, I think so. I mean, you look at what's happened so far this year. When OU has needed to make plays to win games, they haven't done it. Yeah, injuries have been a part of that. But you look what happened to Texas. They haven't faced a test like Oklahoma has, but they were down at Colorado, they were down at Wyoming, and they came back and responded in big ways and won pretty convincingly. So you look at what the teams have done this year. when they've faced adversity, I think you've seen how they've responded, and Texas has responded better than the Sooners have.
Well, this is a situation where Bob Stoops created a great status for himself. The one thing he's always fallen short of Barry Switzer, though, is Sooner magic. Under Stoops, Oklahoma has rarely needed fourth quarter magic, and when it has needed it, it hasn't produced. Barry Switzer, 18-1-4 in games decided by 3 points or less. Bob Stoops, 5-8. What would it do for the Oklahoma psyche, this team, this coach, and even the fan base if the Sooners could win one of those epic, tight games that goes down to the wire tomorrow?
It would be huge because the reputation of Oklahoma right now, like it or not, true or not, is that it's a team that can't win the big game, it's a team that can't come from behind, and it's a team that loses games at the end, close games. So if they were able to come back and win a game in the fourth quarter against the third-ranked team in the country, their big rival, it would be huge for this program and really do a lot for erasing that negative reputation.
The Sooners fallen in stock this year with the 2 losses. A lot of people down on Oklahoma after the loss to Miami. In my mind, though, the game at Miami was a huge lift in encouragement for Oklahoma. The Sooners go down and play a team that's in the top 10 now, in a stadium that was jacked up for one of the biggest games in Miami's recent history, playing without Sam Bradford, and the Sooners go down to the wire and lose 21-20. To me, that was a sign that this Oklahoma team is actually better than what we thought. Your thoughts, Dave?
Well, I think you have a point there, but at the same time, the fans really want to see them get that win. And while it is nice, I think any fan and coach alike is kind of poo-pooing the idea of a moral victory.
Well, this is a game that often is tight, except in the Bob Stoops, Mac Brown era. Only one Stoops versus Brown game is decided by less than 10 points. The 2007 game with Sam Bradford as a freshman. Sooners win 28-21. Why so many lopsided games? Or not necessarily blowouts, but games that are generally over by the fourth quarter?
It's an interesting question. I think part of the reason is that when these two teams have played the last 10 years, one of the teams has been elite and capable of knocking even really good teams out. And you saw even last year where you had 2 elite teams that Texas was able to pull away at the end. But early on in this decade, Oklahoma was a bear. And then when Vince Young, it was the same way for Texas. So I think part of it is the one team has been really good, and the other team, while good, has not been up to that level.
Well, this is an Oklahoma team that has been beset by bad news since the kickoff, or even before the kickoff of this season. But some good news came down Friday. Both free safety Quentin Carter and flanker Ryan Broyles will play Saturday, Bob Stoops says. David, what kind of impact will Quentin Carter make at safety?
Well, I think he just makes sure that there isn't an impact, and that's a great thing. The safeties have played pretty well all season, given up a couple plays, but I think it just makes sure that what hasn't been a liability doesn't become one. And again, having a guy like Quentin Carter back there, he's the hardest hitter on this team, and having a guy that, when Jordan Shipley has to come over the middle, or when those other Texas receivers do come over the middle, they're going to know he's going to be waiting there for him.
Well, the Sooner secondary's been pretty solid this year. It would be fairly scary to play this game without one of the cornerstones, Quentin Carter. But Oklahoma's got to be even more excited to have Ryan Broyles back. Sam Bradford and Ryan Broyles have played one half together this year. What difference does it make to have the best tandem back in the saddle for Oklahoma?
Well, obviously it's huge. I think the biggest thing is Ryan Broyles brings that the other guys really don't, is a guy that can catch the ball and go the distance. A big game breaker, a big playmaker. Ryan Broyles has 7 touchdowns. That's tied for the national lead, and he only has 23 catches. That's a pretty remarkable ratio, and he's a guy that can really change this game if it's going one way or the other.
Well, it's going to be quite the spectacle tomorrow at the Cotton Bowl. Guys, any last thoughts on the eve of the Cotton Bowl?
It's going to be a great atmosphere. This is my first time down to the Red River Rilvalry, and I'm going to be excited to see what that's like.
Jake, your thoughts?
Yeah, it should be a great game. I think you mentioned games haven't been decided by 10 points or less. I think this one goes down to the wire.
Well, I think it'd be great. This series, last year was a fabulous game, 38-35 until the late Texas touchdown. Last year was a great game. I think we could see even one better. It's high time Oklahoma-Texas had a game that goes down to the final minute. Hey, that'll do it for us here at Humperdinck's. We'll meet you tomorrow at the Cotton Bowl. Stay tuned for full coverage of OU Texas on newsok.com, as well as in the Oklahoman. All OU Texas coverage is presented by the Central Oklahoma Nissan dealers.